You hear the stories, but never think it can happen to you. Maybe you're dropping into a steep section of the river, you slip on a rock, slide down, and hear it break. And now what do? And it's cold, it's wet, and it's getting dark. There are a few key pieces of gear that could save your life, and by the end of this episode, you will know which 3 items are a key to have on you at all times, and what common myths you should be avoiding about these. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Brett Stoffel, outdoor survival master and search and rescue teacher, is going to give us his 6 steps to building a survival kit and staying safe out there. You're going to hear about the top myths, including why the survival blanket doesn't work and what you should be using instead, how to start a fire even if it's pouring down rain. We're going to talk about how to get a fire started in any conditions, and how to signal aircraft overhead even if they're at 20,000 feet. We're going to talk about all this today, so you're going to have to not worry at all about getting in trouble while you're out there. Plus, he's going to share and tell us what we need to know about treating water and some of the other common myths around this and what you should be avoiding. I can honestly say this one might save your life. Here he is, Brett Stoffel from OutdoorSafe.com. How you doing, Brett?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. This is going to be a real fun one. I think, we talk a lot about fly fishing and outdoors. We haven't done a ton of outdoor survival, although I know we've had at least a few episodes out there. The great thing today is that you are a leading expert in this field. You've got a long background that goes all the way back to your father and all that. So that's great. And we're going to get into some things. I think some things that people think are basic, like, shelter, like, the survival blankets you see, which we're going to debunk some of that. We're going to talk about fire, signal, but really, how do people stay safe? Because we're out there fly fishing and traveling around the world, and stuff could happen, right? You could break an ankle, break a leg, and how do you survive, say for 2 or 3 days out there in the wild? So we're going to get into all that. Before we do, take us back, because I know your history is amazing. How did you get into this survival? Did it start with your dad?
It did. So, kind of growing up, my father, his name is Skip, and he is a bit of a guru in this field. So I was born and raised. He was teaching this stuff, and he dealt a lot with search and rescue teams and emergency preparedness, kind of at just about every level. So I just thought it was kind of normal. That was just kind of a regular thing for me. When I got into the Air Force after I graduated from college, I had an opportunity. I was flying airplanes for Uncle Sam, and there's a position there called life support. And so I kind of gravitated that way because of my background. So it was a natural fit. So the Air Force sent me to survival school, and then they sent me to accident investigation school, and then search and rescue school. And I ran the parachute shop, and the guys that did all of the training and equipment for the combat pilots in the squadrons that I was a part of. So that was kind of the formal background. And then once I finished with my tours in the Air Force and that sort of thing, I eventually came back to the family business. And that was really what a lot of our clients were kind of ex-military flyers and that sort of thing. And I speak pilot, so that's handy. And so working with those folks, I started kind of in the field and in the classroom, kind of bringing what, my background and my just, expertise in terms of how pilots work and what they've been trained on so far, and then how to kind of integrate that if they got themselves into trouble. So Customs and Border Protection pilots, Coast Guard pilots, and then obviously expanding out into those same arenas that my father had established in our business in terms of, county sheriff's departments they're the ones who are, boots on the ground. If you get in trouble, what is it you can do to make yourself a good customer of search and rescue, so to speak.
Gotcha. That's awesome. And going back to your dad, Skip Stoffel, I love that, right? Yep. It rhymes. It's all that stuff. But have things, back to the day, I'm not sure when your dad started, but if you go back, I'm guessing this is many, many years ago. Have things in the survival changed that much from then until now?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And, it's continuously. So his start, it was the Air Force as well. He was an actual survival instructor. So there's the number of schools that the military branches use. And he was part of the survival school for the Air Force, kind of Vietnam timeframe. And so he trained the folks that were headed to Southeast Asia directly and was part of that. And then that's, kind of the genesis of where our family business kind of came from when he separated from the military. But in terms of there have been several kind of watershed moments as far as survival stuff is concerned. And it was, old school mountain man kind of stuff, in kind of evolving and developing and adding some real science into it, and then a little bit of statistical background, but it has radically changed. And unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that's out there is kind of, it's a hard to shake kind of situation, because there's some bad information out there that I'm not exactly sure where it comes from, but a lot of people think they know. And, you watch TV and you read stories and magazines and all of that. And that's kind of where people go awry. It's common sense, honestly, most of the survival stuff, but it's not common knowledge. That's a little cliche statement, but that's generally how it goes.
Yeah, it's common sense. That's right. And we're going to talk about that today. Maybe just on that bad info. I mean, I know one of those things, like I think everybody has probably right now or seen, is the survival blankets, but what's some of the information or bad information that's out there?
Oh, for sure. Well, the big one that people come in. So yeah, we'll get into space blankets and all of that sort of thing as well, because there's misinformation in that department. But the first thing that people always ask me is, when we're out there in the woods, it's like, what do I eat in a survival situation? I mean, a human being takes 45 to 60 days before you even are in the realm of having to worry about starving to death. So, I mean, that's measured in months, not measured in days or hours like most people. Because, most of us have people in our families or things that are going on where, if you miss lunch, you get hangry and it's a life or death struggle. So there's a lot of misinformation about food, foraging for edible plants and animals and all of that sort of a thing. And frankly, it just isn't that big of priority. It's not that it's a zero priority, but it's generally speaking. I mean, most survival situations, this is another myth. People think, Castaway or, Robin Crusoe kind of situation where you're going to be isolated for weeks on end. We have a database of hundreds of thousands of cases that we take a look at, and 98% ish are completely resolved in 72 hours or less. So when you start thinking about how long is one of these situations, really, what should I expect? It's possible to go longer, obviously, but statistically speaking, 3 days is not very long. But if you look at the timing, that in and of itself kind of colors up what you should do in terms of getting ready and the equipment that you take. Protecting yourself in the Pacific Northwest, for example, for 3 days that can be a challenge, especially, you're in the Central Cascades, or if it's February or whatever the case may be, a little bit of a challenge. It's relatively hostile to human beings, kind of in our, especially if we were out there in our birthday suit. So that's kind of where we start. And we use what we call the priorities and necessities to kind of color that discussion.
That's amazing. No, I love where you're going here, because I think simplifying this is a great way, and getting rid of the misnomers out there, right? Which is food and trying to survive. So I mean, that's one big thing. We'll talk more about that, but we're traveling also this year. We're heading up to Alaska, right? We're actually going to be doing like a road trip up there. I'm going to be doing some remote stuff. And does everything you talk about, does this apply whether you're way up in Alaska where it's super cold, or way down in the desert where it's super hot?
Yeah, it applies everywhere. And so the base needs that a human being kind of comes together with, they're the same. I mean, the human animal, the human machine, however you want to look at it, if you provide the things that the body needs, you get survival. And that's kind of the way to approach it, as opposed to, where in particular you are. The body's needs are the same. The environment changes. So I still need the same things. But if I'm in the tropics of, say, Panama versus the North Slope in Alaska, though providing those requirements is a different situation. I need to get to the same place, but now I've got different challenges, cold versus hot, humid versus dry, snow and frozen versus windy, rain and mosquitoes. There's all kinds of different potentials.
Yeah. Is your the kit, and we're going to talk about that. That's when we first connected, although I've seen your name out there, but you have a kit you can get, which is amazing. And I think you were showing me how to start a fire and stuff, but maybe talk about that a little bit. And I don't know if you want to talk about the fire, shelter, and kind of the three
Yeah,
top
so
things.
there's kind of a priority list, and you've intimated it a couple of times. And shelter, fire, and signaling are kind of the top three priorities. Especially, and we kind of focus on North America just because that's where most of us are. There are other considerations depending on open water or desert or tropics, all of those kinds of things. And we start to get into that as you start to travel south in the United States in particular. But you're talking, especially in Alaska, that sort of thing. Shelter really does rise to the top. And it's all about, the priorities and necessities. You have to ask yourself in this environment, what is the thing that's going to kill me first? And not to be macabre, but it's truly, that's the question to ask. So what's going to kill me first? And that's what you focus on. And that becomes the problem at hand. And when you solve that problem, guess what question you ask? Now what's going to kill me first?
Right. Yeah.
Rinse and repeat until you're not in the situation anymore. And that truly is the scenario. The other thing that I'll add, just on a myth and misconception, there's nothing really glamorous about being risk taking and or doing goofy things, fording the river, swinging from a cliff on a jungle vine or something like that you see in some of the popular materials. If you're bored and warm, so much so that you're falling asleep, I mean, that you kind of are the ultimate survivor. So it's a bit of a paradigm shift.
So if you can fall asleep, if you're in a survival situation, I always love to think of examples like the cool. I mean, not the cool, but the interesting thing is we're around water a lot, and I've heard lots of things. I have friends that are kayakers, and they say the number one death is when people are just walking in the stream because of foot entrapment. But I can imagine somebody's out there, they're fishing or they're doing whatever, and they maybe break an ankle or a leg and they can't walk out, right? But they're wet. So what would be in that situation? Is that something where you could guide us today? You know what I mean? Like just talk about.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so the first, when you're, so you start talking about what, and this ties right into that number one priority as far as shelter. So when you're wet, you've got a real obstacle course in front of you. And the reason is because of water's heat carrying capacity. So not to get into the weeds too much, but water by itself, just solid water conducts heat 25 times better than air at the same temperature. So what happens is when you're in the water, the danger is how much heat is dumping into that water. It's a law of thermodynamics that the thing that's warmer dumps heat into the thing that's colder, and that water is a lot colder, and it just keeps carrying your heat away and your body can't keep up with it. So if you get into the water, there's some interesting examples of this. Most of it have been in a swimming pool in a hot environment or something. You get out of the pool and there's a gust of wind and it feels cold on your skin. And so you're like, oh, I need to get back in the water because it feels warmer. If you follow that urge, that's the wrong answer. Your body can deal with the wet way better. So getting unwet starts to be a priority, but not to the point. I'm not advocating that you strip down naked or anything like that. This gets into clothing selection. So things that have insulating value even when they are wet. So that's where, your wools and some synthetics that are out there as well that will keep insulating. They're hydrophobic, which means they don't tolerate, water. They wick the water away, etc. So that's a real help. So getting as dry as you can and then starting to insulate yourself such that you can be protected from the wind, which generates convective heat loss, and the water that's associated with that as well. So protecting yourself. And there's some pretty simple things that you can do in that regard. So if you've got good gear, you can fish out your rain gear, for example. That's great. But if you don't, even something like a big plastic bag, you can put that on there. The bag creates a volume of trapped air. Your body heats up that air that's inside of that bag with you. And now you've got a protection from the wind and the colder environment outside. So even something like that is a good technique to carry, like in a hip pocket or something like that.
Gotcha. So that goes back to it. So if you were to, in this example, fall into the water, say it's wintertime, you're steelhead fishing and you're freezing, it's cold out there. You get out, you're like, oh my God, what do I do? Maybe you've even broken something, you can't walk. So the first thing isn't to strip naked. It's to literally hope you have some gear on that's still wet. Is that, and then you get the bag around you?
Yeah, exactly. So getting as much of the water off as you can. So you want to get it as dry as possible. So here's another tip, being prepared for something like that. There are some things that really do enhance your comfort. And i.e., I would say maybe a base layer that's in a big Ziploc bag or something that's that's waterproof. So that if you do have a situation like that, you can kind of change that layer and down below. So now you can put some dry socks on, you can put maybe some dry long underwear. You know, if you've got even like a Food Saver vacuum packer or something like that, you put a thin, dry base layer in a bag and vacuum seal it, it doesn't take up much room and it doesn't weigh very much.
If you're looking for a world-class fly fishing experience, it's time to check out Mountain Waters Resort. Nestled along Newfoundland's legendary Portland Creek, this spot has a history that runs as deep as the Atlantic salmon that call it home. Once a fly fishing retreat for the Great Lee Wolf, today it's your turn to step into these historic waters and swing up your salmon this year. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/mountainwaters right now and make it happen. That's wetflyswing.com/mountainwaters. Let's get out there today. Check out Jackson Hole Fly Company today. Premium fly gear straight to your door without the premium price. Jackson Hole Fly Company designs and builds their own fly rods, reels, flies, and gear, delivering quality you can trust at prices that let you fish more and spend less. Whether you're picking up a fly rod for the first time or guiding every day, they've got what you need. Check them out right now. That's jacksonholeflycompany.com. jacksonholeflycompany.com. Part of this too, we might not get to this today, but I've also been thinking about the go bag, right? You hear about this a lot.
Yeah.
You live on the coast, tsunami warnings, you know, you live in town, you're like, well, earthquakes. I mean, you know what I mean? Like stuff could happen. Like that's the reality of it. And so the go bag, I think, is another level, right? Because you maybe are out there longer than 3 days or something. But for what we're talking about, you know, you're saying, yeah, have that gear in there, have the extra base layer. The wool, I love. I mean, I think wool feels like it's like just that one natural thing that nothing has ever come close to. But so if that person was wet and let's say they didn't have a backup layer, so you basically would say, take your stuff out, squish it out, get out the water, put it back on. Now it's still damp, but now you have that. And then let's talk about this bag, because I have one of those space blankets. It folds up so small, but tell us why that is kind of a myth and why that maybe isn't the best thing.
Oh, yeah. I'm on a bit of a crusade against these space blankets. Yeah. And not from the fact that they're useless. That's not the case, but there are so many better options. So this Mylar space blanket, you know, and there's a lot of different varieties out there. There's not one that's in particular, but they are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They go by the bucketful at sporting goods stores and things like that. The blanket itself, what its claim to fame is that it doesn't absorb heat. It reflects 100% of the infrared energy that hits it. So the idea is you're like, oh, that's awesome. I'll just wrap it around myself and my heat will reflect back to me and it'll help to keep me warm. The problem is with those little blankets, they don't reflect it. It doesn't contain the heat. So the heat does hit it and reflect off. It just bounces around and then leaves. And they're a little bit noisy.
Yeah, they are.
Number two. Number three, kind of changing gears from a search and rescue perspective, because they don't absorb any heat and they reflect it completely, they work as active camouflage for any kind of infrared sensor. So a forward-looking infrared, say on a helicopter or an aircraft, you get underneath it, you will literally disappear.
Oh, wow.
The other is that the reflective coating on the outside, people are like, oh, it's shiny, it'll be easy to see. No, the common distance where you get away from that, it's a mirror. So it reflects all of the surrounding terrain and vegetation and everything else. So it's active camouflage. I mean, you can't see it visually. It makes you blend in. It hides from the infrared, and it doesn't do a super good job of protecting you from a heat perspective. Now, if you have nothing else and that's all you have, yeah, it is windproof and waterproof if you can get it to stay together. Most of those space blankets are about 10 microns thick. So that's the width of a human hair. And if you poke a hole in it anywhere, it loses all of its strength and integrity. So it shreds. So, and you know, it's one thing in a gymnasium or in a, you know, kind of
without sticks and pokey things.
Right. So when you wrap this thing around and lean up against a tree, for example, you know, the bark on a tree or a sticker bush or something like that grabs it, what you end up with is Swiss cheese as far as that. And then when you sneeze, it comes apart. So it's literally, you know, I say that kind of in jest, but it's kind of this avalanche of negativity when you deal with it. So I always think about space blankets and say, okay, I'm going to put them in my first aid kit. So it's a windproof, waterproof layer that I could potentially use. We use them. I'm a volunteer ski patroller. So if we get a patient that is hypothermic, we'll wrap them in a space blanket like a burrito. And then we put a wool blanket around that.
Okay. So you will use that space blanket in some situations.
In some situations, yes. But the problem is the rough and tumble is where they just are miserable. And then the connection to what they do to search and rescue sensors, and they make it difficult to see. What you end up with in an integral bag instead, now we start moving up, you get a heavy duty plastic bag, for example, that's lined with Mylar. So that would be what we would call an emergency bivy. That's kind of the next step up from a basic plastic bag and or space blanket. The combination of the two is actually effective. So if you have something there, but unfortunately what you get with an emergency bivy is something that costs you 30, 40 bucks. So we're out of the put it in your pocket, don't worry about it because it's super cheap, which is where the plastic bag comes into play.
What is the, maybe we can go, your kit essentially, maybe talk about, you had that there, this thing that's like over 6 feet tall, it's 3 feet wide. Talk about this. Is that what this thing is?
Yeah, it's exactly. We call it an immediate action shelter bag. My brand name is called a 98.6 bag. But really, it's a big plastic bag. And the plastic itself, the actual bag, if you went and got a contractor bag at Home Depot, it would do the same thing. It's just kind of a different color and maybe not as big. But what happens is it traps air inside the bag. And that air cannot circulate to the outside. So similar to the way a wetsuit works, it traps that material on the inside, and then your body becomes the source of heat on the inside, and it just raises it up. So, environmentally, it could be, close to freezing outside, maybe even into the teens. Your body can warm that air that's inside the bag and it can't circulate. So you'll create an environment that's 50, 60 degrees Fahrenheit inside the bag, as opposed to the freezing, sub-freezing temperatures that are outside. And that is much, much easier to deal with. Now, you couple that with brightly colored. So that's where the blue color of our bag comes in. The blue color that we use, it's a bright royal blue. It doesn't occur in the natural world. So it contrasts with every environment. So you stand out. You stick out like a sore thumb. If you use a black contractor bag, yes, they're cheaper. You can get, 200 of them for 20 bucks at a home improvement store. But you look like a shadow or a rock from distance. So, there's kind of a multi-layered kind of approach. So we try to hit a lot of these things, just kind of without saying.
Yeah, got it. So I'm looking at now, the 98.6 bag on outdoorsafe.com. And actually right here, it's $10, $9.99.
Yep. That's for a vacuum packed one.
Okay.
So a vacuum packed one, and it has a face hole that's pre-cut in it. So there is one for $7 that's just basically a bag, and we put a little razor blade in there because you can do a lot of different things with those as well.
So the cool thing about this bag is, first you have the color, so now they can see you out there. And this thing so it's lined with the Mylar inside of this.
No, this one is not. It's just a plastic bag. So if you put the Mylar inside, that becomes an emergency bivy, is kind of the class for that is, and that you're going to be talking, 30 bucks.
Oh, I see.
40 bucks for something like that.
But for our pack, that, let's say I'm trying to think of the pack, okay, you're out there fishing or hiking. How small is this something like that would go in your pocket?
It would. So it's about the size of a wallet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you fold it up, it's vacuum packed, vacuum sealed down, and it doesn't have an expiration date or anything like that. As long as it stays vacuum sealed, it stays small. There's nothing expiring about it or anything like that. It just makes it really small when it's vacuum packed like that. And then when you need it, you take it out. And the point about some of this gear and some of these concepts, yeah, you can do a lot in terms of protecting yourself, but you give me the back of a pickup truck and I'll make a hell of a survival kit is kind of what it boils down to. You'll be comfortable. But if it's complicated and difficult to carry and heavy, and people don't use it because there's another myth. It always happens to someone else.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So these comments, these concepts are, it's not a big deal until it's a really big deal.
Yeah. No, and that's what we're getting at today. I think that probably a lot of people listening, probably have never had a need for this, right? But you never know when that next time could happen, and that's, I think, what we're building. So your kits are basically built, you have some different levels, but they're made to be pretty compact and you could take with you. So you could throw it, everybody here is probably going to be wearing a fly fishing vest or, something like that, or a pack.
Totally. So my thought is, okay, let's make some kind of immediate action shelter that someone can put in their fishing vest, or they can put in their back pocket while they're wearing their fishing vest. And that way, if it's easy and you just kind of put it in there and forget about it, then you're good to go. And that's we've kind of won the battle, and you don't need it till you need it. And then, there we go.
That's it. Is it better to use, you have the two here, the one that's the pre-cut with, already the face. Is it better to have that, or should you have the one that's not pre-cut? That way you can build like a tent?
It really depends on how much you want to get involved in terms of different environments and different ways to use it, right? So the pre-cut is literally, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is open the package, you can put it on. So that's the idea. The one with the razor blade in it, now you've got a little bit of a cutting tool, but there are other instances, other things that you can use the bag with. So, like for example, if I go to out on a boat, I mentioned it works like a wetsuit. It actually does work just like a wetsuit. So as long as you had some kind of flotation, you can get inside the bag full of water and literally use it. You triple your survival time in cold water because of that. So like if you were offshore, or if you were out, if you've got one of those. So there's more uses for it.
No kidding. So if you were out in the ocean, you didn't have a whatever suit, you could literally put this thing on and it'd be like a wetsuit.
Exactly right. Only you do it inverted. So in the land, I'd put it with the closed end on top of my head, and then I'd have a face hole that I could stick my face through. In the ocean, in the water, open water, I would get into it, kind of feet first in the bottom of the bag and pull it up over the top of my head where the opening portion was, and hold it closed while I've got a life preserver on, that sort of flotation. And that's the effectiveness of it. So your body starts to warm that water up. And now that heat carrying capacity of the water, it starts heating up immediately. And the trick is, in a huge body of water, the water just keeps circulating, right? The warm water just moves away. But if you trap it and it's connected to your body inside the bag, that gives you that amount of water that you can actually warm up. And then it starts to provide a little bit of insulation for you instead of just kind of dumping your heat continuously.
Amazing. So this is awesome. So we've got this now, which, and again, back to our story, let's say you fall in the water, you're wet, you've maybe broken something. So you could get your clothes kind of squeezed out and they're still wet, but you could put this over you. And do you just keep this over you for hours and hours?
You do. And so what will happen eventually, especially if you're wet, the heat will start to evaporate some of that water, and it'll start to condense on the inside of the bag. Because it's like any, most people have worn like a rubber rain suit, or if you button up a tent, with the rain fly on, everything, it gets a bunch of moisture on the inside. So after an hour or two, when you start to visibly see that condensation on the inside, you simply take the bag off, vent it, turn it inside out, and put it on again. And you keep doing that. So it's not, a misconception, people think they're like, oh gosh, this is going to be like the Hilton, right? It's not like cuddling up into a feather bed at the Hilton Hotel. No connection to Hilton, by the way.
Right.
So, but what you end up with is, it's protecting you. It's giving you that layer of protection so that your body can compensate for the environment that you find yourself.
When would you use the, have the tent? Why build a tent versus say this? Because if you have the tent, let's just say you have one of these things, then you're going to have this tent without anything over your body.
Yes, exactly. So, you put over, like a tent, like pitching a tent.
Yeah, like actually making a shelter. Why would you do that? Why not? If you're out there for, say, let's just say the 72 hours, why not just use this bag?
Yeah. So the effort that's required to put something like that as a shelter is concerned. I don't know if you've ever tried to build one of these shelters that you're describing.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No, it's not easy at all. And windproof, waterproof is something that, I stand up in front of classrooms all the time and I say, in an improvised scenario, it's impossible to build a windproof, waterproof shelter with nothing but natural stuff and your hands. It's not actually impossible, from a Mythbusters kind of sense, But it is incredibly difficult. And when you throw injury in and the environment itself, if you're a fisherman and you're in cold water, your steelhead scenario in particular, you lose dexterity and strength in your hands very quickly when you get exposed to those cold environments and when you're wet. And so we have to prevent that. And the faster if you don't guard that 98.6, you lose your mental capacity, you lose your ability, strength. It's hard to even button up your coat or use a zipper, let alone construct some fantastic shelter out of natural materials.
Right. That's awesome. So basically the number one thing is, like we were saying, in the photo is great because it's a guy that's on your website, outdoorsafety.com. Yeah. It's a guy wrapped up and he's got his head sticking out and he's, looking like he's getting ready to fall asleep, maybe, super. But so you have that. Go to the next. Let's talk about the next thing because fire's tough.
Okay, so fire becomes the next stage. So shelter, fire. So, and this, by the way, this list of priorities are the pieces of equipment that I recommend that you carry. So something, it doesn't have to be a 98.6 bag, although, it wouldn't hurt my feelings if that was
Yeah.
what people carried. But you go through there, it's something to protect yourself from the environment that's windproof, that's waterproof, and that stands out. So the next category is fire making, firecraft. So a way to reliably make a fire, no matter what the environment is, when it's wet, when it's windy, when it's cold, all of those. Can you do it when you've got your dominant hand injured, for example? So it's a skill set for sure, but there are some materials that you can use. And we use ferrocerium and cotton and Vaseline, of all things. Those two in combination. So I usually have a little fire kit that I put together, and it takes up even less room than the shelter bag does. And so this just gets added into maybe another pocket or into a container that, I in case of emergency, unzip this pouch.
Yep. And so the fire is, and you did this when we were there, and I saw you were like, this is how it is, because the struggle is, again, let's say you're in a wet environment and everything's wet around you. How do you even start the fire, first of all? And this is what you do. You get cotton mixed with a bunch of Vaseline, put into a little container.
Yeah, so the Vaseline and the cotton burns really, really easily. It catches on fire with a spark. That's what makes it great. But all of us have seen what a cotton ball would do if you expose it to a couple of drips of water. It just absorbs it, and then you don't have a snowball's chance, and where of getting it started. So what you end up with, the Vaseline petroleum jelly, it coats all those cotton fibers and protects them, because Vaseline doesn't mix with water. So it repels the water, and Vaseline actually burns really well. It just has a high flash point. So the cotton takes the spark, starts burning, lights the Vaseline. It's like a candle is kind of the effect. So it's a Vaseline candle that you're packing around with you. But a single cotton ball will burn for almost 10 minutes. And so it's 10 minutes of open flame to get something else burning. Now, in the Pacific Northwest, in certain areas, you go over to the Olympic Peninsula, for example, in Washington State, 144 inches of rain every year. That's 12 feet of water on every square inch of the land. So everything is soaking, sopping wet. And so what you need is something small. So you're asking, hey, what do I burn? You're not going to rub two sticks together in that environment ever to get a fire started. So you need something that works well. And this ferro rod, metal match is what I call it. It's an alloy of a combination of metals that makes sparks, no matter what. And it doesn't matter what the temperature is, whether it's wet or dry, you make those sparks. And those sparks are like 5,000, 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But they're really, really brief. And so what you end up with is a shower of sparks. They hit those cotton fibers. You tear that cotton ball apart that you've packed, and it hits those sparks hit those little cotton fibers, and they light, and then you have 10 minutes of flame. So before you light up the cotton ball, going out into the environment, and you want something that's as protected from the environment wet as you can find. And the best place to get it is, think toothpicks is kind of the size of the wood that you're looking for. But if you get into conifers in particular, that's a, cone bearing, right? So people say pine trees, that's one type of cone bearing. Fir trees, same thing. Spruce trees will do that. You get up underneath right next to the trunk of the tree, a one that's kind of a juvenile or even a fully mature one. The canopy of needles that are on the outside prevent light from getting into the core of the tree right next to the trunk. And what will happen is you'll get a whole bunch of toothpick size branches from when the tree was younger that don't have needles on them anymore. And the tree isn't wasting energy on them because there's no light for photosynthesis in there. But you've got all these little toothpicks on the inside that are protected from the environment and bone dry. And that's what you're looking for. So you get up in right next to the trunk of a conifer and you look for those little dry toothpicks and you gather them. And you get a big bundle, like a whole handful, and that's going to be the first stage. Even in the rainforest of the Pacific Northwest, that technique will work. And the small branches, the little cotton ball fire, it dries them out. Then the temperature comes up, and then they catch on fire.
So what you're saying is you go to the base of any of these conifer trees and just right at the base of the trunk, just grab some of the foliage or whatever is right there.
It's not the foliage. It's literally the branches themselves that don't have any needles on them. The branches, the wood on the inside, the little tiny, as thin as you can find. The thinner, the better. If it's the diameter of a toothpick, you're right what I'm talking about. And it's dead and dry. So standing dead is what we talk about. A big mistake in firecraft that people make, they do two things. Number one, they pick up off the ground anything that they can find. And the stuff that's on the ground is wet. And that just means all that water has to be evaporated before it will catch on fire. And 10 minutes might not be enough, especially if it's larger. But if you get in something that's toothpick size, even if it is moist on the outside, it'll dry out. The other technique, especially in a wet environment, if there's any moss or lichen, they call that goat's beard or old man's beard on that stuff, get rid of all of that before you try to light it on fire.
Oh, you don't want moss or any of that stuff either. Yeah.
Moss actually gets its water from the air, from the relative humidity in the air. So, I mean, water's a fire extinguisher. It doesn't make things burn better, right?
Yeah.
So we want to get rid of the water if we can.
Yeah. So and that's what we're doing with the fire. The fire is kind of burning some of the, but if you get the small toothpicks, then that's going to start your fire. And then what do you do? Do you just get branches that are
branches? Exactly. So go into the same place. Those branches, the little tiny toothpicks, are going to be attached to things that are the size of a pencil or your little finger. And then that's the next stage. And then after that, you get something that's, the diameter of your thumb. And then you get something that's, the size, maybe 1.5 inches in diameter. And at that point, when you've got 1.5 inches in diameter burning, you can put wet wood on that and it'll eventually dry out and catch and everything else. So it's a building process. And that's the part. What you don't want is, when your cotton ball burns out after 10 minutes to have a bunch of black sticks and not a burning fire. And that's the way you do it.
Okay. And why is, let's just take this scenario. You're going to be out there for 72 hours. Why is fire important if you're not cooking anything?
Well, so what we end up with is a heat source. Okay. So the heat source, now we've got a way to continue to dry out. And as soon as our materials, our clothing is dry, so we put the shelter bag on, we've got a way that infrared actually goes through the plastic and it warms up the air on the inside. So you got a little bit of a muggy environment inside of that thing. But I'm trying to get rid of the moisture in my clothing, number one. And number two, now I've got a way to get my hands warmed up, to get some circulation in there. And now my hands are going to work better. I'm protecting my faculties. That 98.6 temperature on the inside, it enhances that.
Yeah, gotcha. And then once you get a fire going, you can start to take off some of those clothing layers and dry them off?
You can take off the layers, dry them out, and then when they're dry, put them back on, and now you've just enhanced again. And that's kind of the ultimate. In your situation, those getting dry and getting a fire started are probably the two big.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
And then what you end up with the fire is it's a signal of a sort as well. So it serves multiple purposes, right? The smoke is visible, the light is visible at night. When it gets dark, now you have, you can actually work a little bit. It'll keep the critters away. Animals and insects are both, so fire becomes an enhancement for your mental state. It's multi-tiered, but, it's an enhancement to the shelter as well. And then the final piece at that point is signaling. That's the big three, right? Shelter, fire, signaling.
Yeah. Well, before you get into signal, I want to tee this up because this is great. First of all, you said that the fire is good for, like, if people are worried about animals, like cougars do not like fires. If they see a big fire going, They're probably not going to come mess with you, or bears or whatever if you're up in Alaska. We did this. It was interesting. I wish I would have had your survival kit. I probably would have been less worried, but we were in the middle of Alaska. This was quite a few years ago. Our boat broke down and we were just like on a gravel bar in the middle of like literally the Yukon Delta 20 million acre wildlife refuge.
Yep.
And we were like, okay, what do we do? No food. We had waders on. So literally we started a fire. We slept in our waders, had the shotgun with us next to for bears, and we went down and caught a couple coho and ate some food. You know what I mean? The next morning, our friend came, like you said, less than 72 hours. The next boat came and they found us broke down. But, in that situation, the fire was key because it felt like, we stayed warm, right? That was key, but it just kept our mental, right?
Yeah, we call it survival TV.
Yeah.
It's always the same channel, but everybody loves it. And it's always the same show.
Right, right. You never get tired of it. That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to add the ferro rod basically to our gear kit. And then also you mentioned the cotton, the Vaseline, and that can just go into whatever like waterproof container sort of thing.
Exactly. So some people will put it into, they try to get a little chintzy and they'll put it in a Ziploc bag. And that works great for a few minutes. Longer than a few minutes, but a season in your bag, if you put a Ziploc bag into your gear and then leave it there for a year, it's going to get a bunch of pinholes in it. And then the next summer, when it's in the trunk and it's 120 degrees in the trunk, it will melt and it'll get all over your gear.
Oh, so don't do that. So what is it the little orange, like,
yeah, there's a little orange match case. Those work well. You can go. And so here's another key, just a generalized tip. if you have a piece of equipment, Americans in particular are infatuated with tactically colored stuff. OD green, black, steel gray, camo stuff, right? Well, if you drop something that is camo, steel gray or forest green in the forest, you do not have any chance of finding it again. So something that is critical, your survival gear, bright orange. I have blue duct tape, for example. I put these flashes of color on my gear that I don't want to lose. I mean, my survival knife, it's got just search and rescue orange on the tip, and on the sheath is that color, as opposed to the one that I could get. I mean, it looks cooler to carry an OD green knife on your hip, I guarantee you, as opposed to this one that looks like a clown
Right.
should be carrying it. But when you drop that, you can find it. It sticks out. It's like, oh, there it is. I mean, from 20 yards away, you can see it. And that's one of those things that, something that you don't want. So your fire kit, I mean, put it in a bright orange bag. Your little tinder source that you're going to, light cotton on fire, don't put it in an OD green plastic one. Get a bright orange or a bright blue one.
Okay. So that's good. So use the bright orange, and then you mentioned the blue. So do you need in this kit, do you need matches? It seems like the ferro rod is pretty much your match.
No, so they always talk about using, this is a Boy Scout trick. When I was a kid, there's like always have two methods to start a fire. And it's one of those. Well, so I mistakenly thought, I'll get a method that works, and then I'll have to do something else. So the classic would be like a ferro rod or a lighter, and then matches as a secondary, right? It's like, me personally, I take two ferro rods. The reason for that is if you lose your primary, you've got something that works as a backup. Well, that ferro rod, it is universal. I mean, matches work great as long as you keep them dry. I don't know if you ever try to light a wet match, but it's not fun or easy.
Yeah, I don't like the match. Yeah, this is great. So I could see us having the little quick pocket thing with the ferro rod, and then maybe in your pack you got another ferro rod in there.
Totally, that's how I do it.
Yeah, in case something happens and you lose your pack, and now you at least have the three things.
Well, and even those little match cases that we recommend, those have a little tiny strip of ferro rod on the end. And so there's maybe 2 or 3 strikes worth of sparks that you get there just as an absolute backup. So there's multi layers of being prepared as you go through there.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, so the ferro rod's huge. So the third thing, at least in this, is the signal, which is another game changer for me, because explain that. You showed me that, but this is pretty awesome because there's lots of planes overhead, right?
There are. And so what you end up with is you've got aircraft for sure, search and rescue teams, but you already hit the nail on the head as to why you need this signal. You were talking about this 20,000 acre, wildlife refuge, right? That's a big piece of ground. And so how do you reach out and let someone know that you are in trouble? And that's the thing. I have to get the attention of someone who can potentially help me. And that's what signaling is all about. So there's a couple of ways to do it. Probably the most effective daytime signal that's out there is what's called a signal mirror. So that reflects the sun, but you need the sun in that case. So there are pieces of equipment now signaling at night. Some kind of an artificial light source is appropriate. So that's where your fire comes in. The smoke in the daytime is also a signal. If there's search and rescue in those areas, and this is where that multi-tier kind of stuff comes in. So if our shelter bag is bright blue and sticks out like a sore thumb, and we enhance that shelter with the fire, and then when it starts to get dusky, that fire sticks out like a sore thumb, and now a helicopter's out there with forward-looking infrared and low light night vision. They can see that fire from 50, 60 miles away if they're up at altitude. Wow. So, I mean, all of a sudden, all of these things, and then when they get close, it's like there's this wash of green vegetation and then this little bright blue thing over there. And they're like, what is that blue thing? So now all of a sudden it starts to make sense why you integrate all of these things together to make it easier. One of the most important signals, and it's a little bit, I'm tongue in cheek when I'm saying this, is to let somebody know where you're going and what your plan is, so that when you don't come home on Sunday night, they realize that you're not just being a flake and you're going to be out there for 3 extra days or whatever. And that's what starts the rescue process.
The one I always go to on that is the guy that, remember that book that the guy cut his arm off to get out? Remember?
Aaron Ralston.
Right. He was, nobody knew, right? And that was
that's right.
What was the name of that? Do you remember the name of that?
It's a certain number of days. I want to say it was like 27 days or whatever it is.
What was his name?
Aaron Ralston.
Yeah, Aaron Ralston.
Yeah, he's a climber. He's a professional climber. And that was in Colorado that happened.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, he was pinned, and he was pinned for so long. his arm was basically crushed. Anyway, he cut his arm off with a Leatherman.
Yeah, 127 hours.
127 hours. That's what it was. Yeah.
And so what is that? So you said the average 98% is within 3 days, which is 72 hours. So he went a little bit longer.
He went a little bit longer than the average. But why did he go a little bit longer? Well, he was at the bottom of a rock canyon and he didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And everybody had to notice that he was gone before they started the rescue to go, look at it.
Step into the world where the river whispers and the fishing is nothing short of legendary. This year, I ventured into the heart of eastern Idaho's Yellowstone Teton territory where the fish were larger than life and the waters held the secrets of the best fly fishing out west. Yellowstone Teton territory is not just a location, it's a gateway to adventures that will etch themselves into your memory. With crystal clear rivers like the Henry's Fork and the South Fork of the Snake, and enough lakes to keep you going all year long, make your way to Yellowstone Teton territory and embark on a journey to one of North America's finest fly fishing destinations. Whether you're planning your trip now or just dreaming it up, the YTT is where those dreams turn into reality. Remember, Yellowstone Teton territory. That's Teton, Teton. It's time to experience Eastern Idaho for yourself and support this podcast at the same time. Do you think he would have, if he would have had your kit there, do you think he wouldn't have had to cut his arm off potentially?
That's a good question. Potentially, he thought that if he didn't cut his arm off, that he was going to be stuck there because nobody would ever find him. So on the signaling side of that, bottom of a box canyon, really difficult. It's an open question. So would he have been able to last longer with my kit? Unquestionably. Whether he would have actually had to cut his arm off or not, that's a tough one.
Yeah, right. Because like you said, the food you don't really need for 127 hours. Water, I guess. Well, let's talk about that. So, first, before we talk about water, I want to get into that. Let's talk about how to signal the plane, because you mentioned how you can actually point so the airline pilot actually gets the flash.
Exactly. So what you end up with, it's hard to show on, but if you get an improvised signal, I don't know if you can see my hands or not, that you go in there. So you actually can use your fingers like a gun sight, and you can point the reflection of a mirror through that. But what works even better than that is there are mirrors that are designed to flash aircraft. So the military uses them all the time. That's why I'm familiar. I was a military life support guy.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a little fiberglass mesh that's that you can see in there's an aiming circle on the inside that's basically, it punches right through the mirror itself. And on that fiberglass mesh, there are all these little microscopic glass beads that are oriented in just the right way that refract part of the light source that you're reflecting, i.e. the sun. And when you look through that little clear aiming window, you can see a glowing dot. And that glowing dot is basically the reflection where it's going. So when you look through the sight, you put the little glowing dot on whatever you want to get the flash. So if an airline pilot is flying by, you literally put that on the airplane and you just wiggle the mirror back and forth, and they will get that flash from the ground. And my background in aviation, if you see something that looks like the sun from the ground and it keeps flashing you, it's really hard to ignore.
Yeah. So basically, this device isn't just a mirror, right? This is this is on your site. I think
it is.
Yeah, it's called just a signal mirror glass.
It is. It's from the original company that made them was called Vector One. They're glass signal mirrors, and it's a military specification or mil spec glass signaling mirror. Coghlan's actually bought Vector One when the founder of that company passed away. So a Coghlan's glass signaling mirror, and you can get these things online. You can get them from me. I sell them. And then there is actually a plastic version that's called a rescue flash. A company called SOL sells those.
Oh yeah, SOL. Sure.
Survive outdoors longer, right?
That's right. SOL. Okay, and so that's the mirror. So the cool thing about this mirror is that you can actually, it's not just a regular mirror flashing things. You can pinpoint this thing so it goes to the pilot by zooming in, like you said.
And so anecdotally, you're talking as long as they're visible in the horizon. So something at 15, 20,000 feet, you could signal them 30, 40 miles away potentially. from the sun. And that, it happens all the time in the military context. There are stories about, signals at 50, 60 miles. That might be a bit of a stretch, but again, 30 miles is definitely within realm. And that's to be able to reach out in the middle of the day, 20 to 30 miles, really does make you stand out. And that's
okay. And where could be, I know on your website you have some DVD. Is there a place where somebody can watch you signaling or seeing this demonstrated? Or what would you recommend to follow up to kind of take more to learn how to do this?
I do have some literature on there. I've got a survival basics blog. I do sell a video, but it's a little bit like watching paint dry.
Okay.
It's an older colleague of mine that actually does that. So, we do sell, it's a little, at this point, it used to be a DVD. Now it's a USB drive. If you were interested in that, that is something that I should probably pursue now that you're even thinking about it. Most of the time I demonstrate.
You demonstrate. Yeah. Because where people can find you is at your show. Now talk about that real quick. Let's take on what you do, because you go around to shows. Are you covering mostly the Northwest, or are you going around the world, the country?
I do go all over the world. I do aircrew survival training, and then I do people survival training, obviously, that are just outdoor users, that sort of thing. So you and I connected at the Sportsman show in Portland, Oregon, I believe. And so as you go in there, that's a kind of a public safety aspect. So Toyota sponsors me to come in and give talks to people, and I demonstrate and show how a lot of this stuff works. Because there is so much myth and misconception out there. But I spend a lot of time working with search and rescue teams. I train them on how to search. So what I'm trying to do is pass as much information to the public. Your listeners in particular are a good example of that, of a demographic that could potentially need search and rescue services. And so, hey, how do you be a good customer for search and rescue? And then on the search and rescue side, hey, how do we effectively look for people? What do lost people do? What's their behavior? How do you manage an operation like that?
Okay, cool. This is awesome. So we've got the signal mirror, we've got some of that. So really we're still in the three things.
We're still in the big three. The one other thing I would add, in addition to the signal mirror, is a whistle, a really loud whistle. And the reason is because, I don't know if you've ever been to a rock concert or not, but if you're yelling and screaming at the top of your lungs, I'll give you maybe 10, 12 minutes of that. And I mean, really making as much noise with your voice as is humanly possible. Your vocal cords just don't last, but you can blow on a whistle all day for a week. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. And what you want is somebody, because that your whistle blast can carry literally for a mile or two. And again, it just makes your footprint larger so that anybody who comes within that zone can actually see you or hear you or figure out that you're there and need some help.
Right. So whistle's good. We mentioned water. So you're out there. What do you tell people about water? Do they need to be drinking water?
So water disinfection and storage. So what I have is a 6-category list. So the big 3, that's the minimum. That's what I always focus on. So if you got nothing else, shelter, fire, signaling, those are the 3 that you definitely want to concentrate on. The next 3, water disinfection and storage, survival medicine, and then tools. And so those are the next 3. So a survival kit actually has 6 component groups, and this is literally where I start. So I'll do survival kits that you're going to put in a vehicle, for example, or I'll do them for a sheriff's department or whatever. So getting back to what you're talking, water disinfection and storage. So is water a big deal? It can be. So 72 hours, the old scouting rule of 3s, they say you can go 3 days without water. It's really variable depending on how hydrated you are when you start, what your activity level is, and the environment. So, I mean, if I have you sit in a lazy boy chair in your living room and don't move, you could go much longer than 3 days probably without water. It wouldn't be pleasant. But if we go down to Death Valley on the 4th of July at noon and we do a CrossFit workout, we're going to need water way faster than 3 days. And so that's a little bit of variability there. What you end up with in water, it's a bit of snake oil. You kind of need to know what you're filtering and what the situation is. So in North America, we've got pretty good hygiene stuff and sanitation as far as the water is concerned. The primary threat is Cryptosporidium and Giardia, which are protozoa that are from animals, pooping and peeing in the water. And the interesting thing about that is those pathogens are not necessarily deadly. They just make you miserable. I don't know if you've ever had Giardia or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's not very much fun. Really, really bad gas pains and stomach cramping and diarrhea even. So obviously we want to avoid that. So the good news about Cryptosporidium and Giardia is they're relatively big on the microbial scale. So they're relatively easy to filter out. So there are carbon filters that you can get.
Yeah, like the life straw.
Yeah, Sawyer Life Straw. That's a good example.
Yeah.
So really, really effective. So what you're doing, I mean, you think like a Brita filter, that you have to make the chlorine taste go out of your water, at home or something like that. It's a very similar technology that goes through there. So it's still a screen, and the microbes are kind of like, the basketballs of the microbial world. So they're easy to filter out. So I would highly recommend doing that, especially if you're going to be drinking out of a stream or a creek or something like that.
So have one of those little straws or something like that in there.
Yeah. The other option is chemical disinfection.
Yeah, like water tablets.
Yeah, water tablets. So the old school solution was iodine, like a company called Potable Aqua. They'd have you put iodine tablets. And the irony of this, I mean, I was in scouting when I was a kid too, and we put this Potable Aqua iodine tablets in, and they had these little pills that you put on them after the iodine to make it taste better, like the little lemon drops. And iodine is not effective in controlling protozoa. So that part of their life cycle is a little cyst, and the cell wall is so thick that the iodine can't get through it. So what you're doing is the iodine was killing bacteria and viruses for sure, and is effective at doing that. You need a more powerful chemical, and what you'll find is chlorine dioxide is kind of the chemical of choice. There are other things that are out there. Be very wary of buying old water disinfection materials at a swap meet or something like that. Just go in. Chlorine dioxide has about a 5-year shelf life. Each tablet, the way that they're designed, is for a liter of water. Half a pop bottle, big pop bottle is kind of how much water you can disinfect. The big mistake that people make when they're disinfecting water chemically is they don't give it enough time to actually work. It takes, at room temperature, so say 70 degrees Fahrenheit, it takes 30 minutes for those chemicals to kill all the critters in the water. If you just put the tablets in the water, shake it up and drink it, it just makes the water taste bad. It doesn't really do any good for you. At freezing temperatures, or right before the water goes solid into ice, it takes 4 hours of contact time to disinfect the water. So there's a little bit of a caveat with that. Very, very dense, very, very effective for small amounts of water. In fact, for a micro kit that you could carry in a pocket and you're worried, about 3 or 4 days, to disinfect water, chlorine dioxide tablets would be a very effective solution, because a life straw even takes up more room and weighs a little bit from a density standpoint.
So that's it. So, and I see on your website you have Micro Pure. Are those tablets?
Katadine's Micro Pure 1. Yep, that's probably the most popular version that's out there, the most easily available.
Yeah, and you got 20 tablets. So literally, I mean, like one per bottle. I mean, you could probably just throw in 5 tablets and probably be good.
Totally. That's exactly what I'm saying. Now, the other thing on the water side, you need something to put your water in. So, if let people will carry like a Yeti bottle or a Hydro Flask or something, because they work great, but those are like thermoses. So I've got another option, another brand, a Clean Canteen. What you use for those, because they can you can use them to heat water up. So another disinfection technique for water, if you run out of the tablets, is to boil it. So that's the one that you can do long term, but it presupposes that you have at least something that you can heat the water up in, right? So, when you're really looking at a small, low impact weight and space, taking a collapsible platypus water bag is not a bad example as well, because when it's empty, it doesn't take up any room at all and it weighs almost nothing. But you can actually put a liter of water into it.
And you could pump into it.
Yep.
I see you can bring a filter pump too, so you could pump into your
Exactly.
platypus. So there you go. Okay. And that's awesome. I mean, the tablets. So, and you're saying when you put those tablets in, you need to let it sit in there for hours before you can drink the water?
At least 30 minutes.
Oh, at least 30 minutes. Okay.
At least 30 minutes. So room temperature water is 30 minutes. Freezing water is 4 hours. So it's a spectrum from those two, depending on what the temperature of the water is. So if you're up in Alaska and it's like glacier fed stream, it's going to be longer than 30 minutes.
Oh,
as you go out there, the thing about water filters, the answer is money. Now ask your question. You can get a reverse osmosis filter pump that, they use in life rafts, and that'll desalinate the water.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, the screen on that is so fine that a molecule of salt will not fit through the screen, but H2O, a single molecule of water, goes through. So that purifies the water. Now, all the way back to your little Sawyer Life Straw, what I'm trying to disinfect is important because, so Cryptosporidium and Giardia, those protozoa that I mentioned, they're relatively large and easy. But let's say we have an earthquake, a 9.0 earthquake on the I-5 corridor in the Pacific Northwest, or you're south of Seattle or something like that. Okay, the sewer line breaks, and now we get E. coli in the water supply. What happens every once in a while, when they're doing construction or something, you get a notice from the water company, and they're like, "Hey, boil your water for the next couple of days." Right? Well, what they're telling you is there's bacteria in there. Well, a soy or life straw will not factor the bacteria out. They're too small. They get through the screen. So what you're trying to do, if I go to sub-Saharan Africa and I worry about Ebola virus or something like that, right? Viruses are orders of magnitude smaller than bacteria. Bacteria are orders of magnitude smaller than protozoa. So it takes successively thinner and thinner filters to get the small, when I say thinner, I mean smaller pore size filters. So when you go out there, and this is why I said snake oil at the very beginning, every water filter salesman is going to tell you his is the very best. So you beware of weasel words, things like,
good for everything.
Well, nominal is what when somebody says, what's the nominal filtration size as opposed to absolute? So, i.e., what is the biggest thing that's possible to get through this screen? And that's where you go in there. So there are good filters out there, and there are filters that will filter viruses and that sort of thing. They're just a lot more expensive. So a life straw is going to cost you, you're talking $20. You get one that filters viruses, you're going to spend $300 or $400.
Right. Gotcha. So for what we're talking about, which is, maybe in, the US, in our example, again, somebody's in the stream, that might be good enough. The life straw or the tablets.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Now, one other caveat, and then we can move on away from water. If you have no filtration or disinfection capability, drink the water.
I was going to ask you about that because we had Yvon Chouinard on. I believe he said this, from Patagonia, the founder. Yep. And he said on that podcast, like, hey, I've been drinking the water straight from the stream for my whole life.
Yep.
And what is going on with that? Is that because his body's used to it or what?
Well, yes, his body is used to it, number one. And number two, there's a lot of water volume that doesn't have protozoa in it. And I told you the ineffectiveness of iodine in killing protozoa. I drank water as a scout. We did 50-mile hikes and got the hiking merit badge and all that kind of stuff. And we were drinking out of streams all the time and just fat, dumb, and happy, putting these little tablets in the water that wasn't protecting us at all. And so, some of us got sick, but it was usually attributed to not doing your dishes well enough or, some kind of an issue like that. But we all survived it. And so what you end up with is some discomfort. And you've had an incidence of it. Can it be serious? It totally can. So it's prophylactic, but we can cure sick. We cannot cure dead from dehydration.
Yeah.
So, being overly scared, it's an evaluation, right? What's going to kill me? If I need water and I have a water source, it's absolutely silly not to drink the water in that context.
Yeah, that's a great point. Cool. So that's a little on water. And again, all of this we can follow up with you on your site. You've got the survival blog as well, which I'm sure goes into some of this. So, and I'm looking at now. This is cool. I'm looking at your blog now. What's wrong with the space blanket? You got tools and supply. So cool. This is going to be a good resource, I think, for people that want to move further. But let's get the last. You mentioned 6, so let's go to the last, number 5.
The last 2. So the next one, this one's pretty straightforward. Is survival medicine. So when I say survival medicine, first aid is not what I'm talking about. So first aid is a totally different subject. And am I advocating you carry a first aid kit? Absolutely, I am. And it should be commensurate with whatever training level you've received. But you should get some, number one. It should be focused on wilderness, especially if you're going to go out in the woods. And that means where you may be outside of being able to call 911. Or what do you do if you come upon somebody in your party or you yourself are injured? You are definitive care at that point. So that's where wilderness medicine comes in. But the survival medicine piece on the survival kit, there's 2 aspects of this. Number one is kind of a Band-Aid boo-boo kit. So if you stick a fish hook in your thumb and, you get it out and everything else, but you don't want to cancel your trip because of that. So there's some basic stuff that you put in there. So this is like a Neosporin and a good set of bandages or maybe some medical tape that will actually stick so that you can protect your hand so that a little annoying injury like that doesn't become a life-threatening injury. That's the first aspect. So that's where you get your Band-Aids, generic antibacterial soap, and some antibacterial ointment. some just basic Band-Aid and bandaging from varying sizes, etc. You do have to cycle those out every couple of years because the adhesive on those things will go bad. The other is any personal medications. So let's say you're on blood pressure meds, or you're a diabetic, or you have an allergy to bees, or to something like that. What we recommend in a survival kit is a 10-day supply. So you're just your medication, whatever it is. If you've got beta blockers because you've got, AFib or something like that. I mean, this, as you get into, older demographics, a lot of them have a regimen of medicines and that sort of a thing. So that just takes that off the table as something that is going to sneak up on you. And it can be extremely serious, and it can be more of an inconvenience. But like I said, a 10-day supply of the medications that you're on is what we recommend.
Yeah, 10 days. Okay. So basically medicine is just literally that's the medications you need just to survive, again, to keep you from dying. That's kind of the focus of that for the most part. And then,
it is. Now, the basic comfort stuff. So generic pain relievers. So your ibuprofen, if you twist your ankle, an anti-inflammatory like ibuprofen. Obviously, don't do that if you have medications that conflict with, NSAIDs and stuff like that. But if you go in, and then there's also, baby aspirin, for example, if you have, as a potential treatment for somebody in your, somebody has a heart attack or something like that. These are all little things that you could add to a kit that are kind of over-the-counter medications that are effective. Benadryl as a generic anaphylactic. So if you have an allergic reaction to something you're not even aware of, that can be helpful. Imodium or Pepto-Bismol tablets, right? So these are things that make you feel a little bit better. They make something that could be relatively miserable a little bit more tolerable. Because when all of this is said and done, and even when we talk about food, we mentioned that food is a myth, that you need it. It is a powerful psychological benefit to have something to eat or to chew on or to suck on or something. So when somebody says, should I put food in my survival kit? They usually get a lecture that lasts an hour long first. And then I say, absolutely, yes, put some food in it.
Right.
Because it makes you feel better, right?
Yeah.
So you put a little, so that's the key. Because if your psychological state goes up, then your physical reaction to the harsh conditions and everything else gets better.
Okay. So, and food could be what, like a Cliff Bar, or right, like anything?
Totally. Cliff Bar or a protein bar, even like the little power snacks that you can get, if you bonk on the trail or something like that, any of that kind of stuff, something that keeps well, depending on how long it's been, you replenish it before you go out on the trip. You put something decent in there. Even some hard candy is beneficial in that regard. So again, it makes you feel better. I'm hungry, I'm bored, and I'm scared are kind of synonymous with give me something to eat and I'll feel better.
Yeah, gotcha. God, that's perfect. Well, I think the last one is going to be good because is it tools? Is that the last?
Tools. That's exactly it. Yep.
So we all love tools, right? We all love a pocket knife.
Absolutely. So a knife is a good survival tool. I would say a solid shank knife. That's what I put in. And the reason is because a knife with a hinge in it, the hinge is the weak point on the knife, even if it's a high quality one. And we start batoning, i.e. pounding on a knife with a big stick or a hammer, you'll break the hinge. So another one is a saw of some sort. So these are force multipliers when you're dealing with creating shelter, with creating fire, with fueling the fire and that sort of a thing. Signaling, all of that is just, you have the ability to kind of expand out into the environment a little bit. So you're not just, stuck with breaking sticks that you can do with your hands and things like that. So a solid shank knife, try to avoid one that's got spikes, K-bar piece spikes on the back of the handle, or a saw blade or anything like that. Because when you baton, which is literally hit the back of that knife with a larger piece of wood or something like that, you'll chew through that hammer very quickly if it's got a blade on the back of it.
Gotcha.
So anyway, that's a backup. By the way, the knife is a good backup for the ferro rod, because it usually takes, carbon steel is the best thing to make sparks with it.
Oh,
so,
okay. So you could use that.
Yep. Saw, knife, and then your Leatherman, like not Leatherman in particular, let's say multi-tool, right? So there's a lot of different brands. It doesn't have to be Leatherman. But for repair, for going in and monkeying with stuff, for taking apart or putting something together, using the resources, improvising a Phillips head screwdriver or improvising a set of pliers is just not practical. You either have them or you don't.
Yeah. What might you use a pair of pliers out there for?
Well, so think about this, depending upon what your equipment is, right? So everything from, let's say you break your you damage your rod and reel when you
Oh
drop it
yeah.
or something like that. There's potentials for, I'm thinking more in context like one of the examples that I have, I was doing mountaineering and I was skinning up a slope that was covered in snow, and my binding broke. And so I used the pliers to disassemble the bindings, right? I didn't have a wrench. And so what you ended up with is it, like I said, it's just that
You never
leverage.
know, right? You never
You
know.
don't know. And it's amazing what you can do from an improvisational standpoint when you have some basic tools that help you with that stuff.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff on there, I'm sure. And the one that I have, I've had a few, but like, the Leatherman Wave, I mean, does
Yeah.
it matter what multi do they
It doesn't. Take a look at the tools. They're all useful. I mean, people are like, oh, what do I need a pair of scissors for? Well, you'd be surprised, right? So cutting a plastic bag, for example, the face hole in a plastic bag, a set of scissors makes that process really easy. A nail file. If you tear a fingernail, that can be a pain in the tush to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to just bite it off because then, you get down and it starts to hurt, right? So again, there's just all these little things that could potentially, let alone, sharpening hooks or whatever the case might be that you're dealing with some of this stuff. An awl or a punch is another one that's on there. Some of them will have a little Phillips head screwdriver head on them. There's variations. Take a look at what the tools are and say, well, when would I use this? Okay, maybe I don't need the magnifying glass, but if I'm reading little tiny instructions on another piece of equipment, that magnifying glass is really handy.
That's a good point. Yeah, especially if you're older like me, the glasses.
Right? My eyes.
If you lose your glasses or you don't have them,
it's like, now what do I do?
Good. So that's tools, and pretty much like you said, everything. They could look at all the tools on your site. Do you have probably a place that they could look at some of the other ones?
I do. So, and the tools kind of vary back and forth. So there are some electronics things. A compass. People who know how to use a compass, guess what they don't get? Lost. Right?
Right.
A compass is a good thing. It's kind of it's a vanishing skill. And that, your cell phone is a fantastic signaling device, by the way.
Right.
It's not a good compass. Even if you download an app that says it's a compass app.
Yeah. So even Onyx, if you've got Onyx or Trout Routes, right? It's not, those aren't perfect.
They are not perfect. So having something that will actually work, because they're dependent on network coverage. And they're also, now a GPS is another tool. Now, as technology keeps getting better, there are some phones and apps that have decent GPS and don't need network connectivity. So it is possible to have that, but that goes in the tools category. Anything electronic, when you start talking about signaling, having a light source that you can use to flash at an airplane or to flash at rescuers, but then also so you can see what you're doing at night are things to add. So a light is kind of a tool, but it's also a signal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if you get multiple uses from these different items, it's just more incentive that that's a good item to carry. With that being said, try to avoid all-in-one survival tools. And the reason I say that is because if you lose an all-in-one survival tool, you just lost all your survival tools.
Right. Yeah. Get it. What's the word for it? You want to have multiple layers, right? You don't.
Yes, exactly right. So fallbacks, it's alternates. Yes, exactly right.
Okay. We're going to take it out of here pretty quick. We have a segment we call our Instagram story segment, and this is where we're going to get a story out of you on maybe some survival situations that, where you applied some of this. But today, this is presented by Four Wheel Campers. So Four Wheel Campers is with a camper we're going to be taking up to Alaska. We mentioned this trip. We're going to be traveling up there all the way. And you never know what could happen along the way, right? We might break down, who knows, right? But we're gonna have your gear. That's the point. Is on this trip, I'm gonna make sure to get all this stuff, so we've got this in the truck. But let's go to that first, because on the stories part of it. First, shout out to Four Wheel Campers. But do you have something that would maybe a story out there that we can remember what we're talking about here?
There are a couple. I've got a couple of stories where what you end up with is not necessarily an example where everything gets applied. So most of my stories it's a one-off. Like there's one investigation terms, we call it the accident chain, right? There are all these links that come together in the accident chain. And if any one of those links get broken, the accident doesn't happen or the situation doesn't occur. And that's kind of where you come into these kind of situations. So the first example, so this is an example of this kind of story. So I'm a deer hunter, right? So Pacific Northwest, Washington State, I'm hunting for mule deer is in the area where we are. It happened to be foggy that morning. So coming down the hillside, it was foggy enough that I couldn't see the surrounding area. So I went up the hill in the first part of the morning. And then when I was not successful, was turning around and trying to come back down to the road where I parked my truck earlier. And I went down, I was on a ridge line. So I thought, I'm just going to walk this ridge line. And I'm walking the ridge line. And all of a sudden I get to the bottom of the hill and not only is there no truck, there's no road.
Oh, wow.
Right. But it's foggy. I mean, I can only see maybe 10 yards. I mean, that's probably the distance, right? Well, so that's the first step where you're like, okay.
Yeah, like stop. I always get to that step. I'm like, okay, what is the first thing you do? Do you backtrack? Do you sit down? What do you do?
So the Air Force had a little acronym for me it works great. It's called Stop, Think, Observe, Plan, STOP. So stop is absolutely what you do. So the S in stop is literally stop moving. When you're out of control, you feel uncomfortable, whatever the case is, it is literally it feels better because you have control over your movement.
Right. You're not potentially getting worse off than you were.
You're right. And so I'm going to drive some of this nervous energy into my feet and I can dispel it that way. And it feels good because I'm doing something. Not necessarily the best solution in every case because you could potentially make it worse. So sit down, take a drink of water, think a little bit about what was going on. Because, the first thing that comes into your mind in a situation like that is, I just went through the twilight zone and I'm now back in time when there's not a road there. And it's like, that's what comes to mind. It's like, because I couldn't possibly have taken a wrong turn, right?
Yeah.
So that's where you start to rationalize a little bit and you say, okay, what is it that's going, okay, no, this is not some science fiction movie that I'm a part of. Now I came down the wrong ridgeline. So how do I fix this? And this is where it's the point of convenience, which is like, well, I can start walking along the bottom of the hill. I think that's where people get into trouble.
Yeah.
Because the real solution is to go back up the hill.
Go back, follow your steps if you can back.
Yes. Go right back up to where you know where you were and then pay attention a little more specifically so that you don't take the wrong finger ridge. And that's exactly what I did. So I hiked back up the hill and it took me a whole extra hour to hike up the hill, go back to where I was. And then I went down the right and guess what was at the bottom of the hill?
Yeah, your truck.
My truck. And so, getting lost in the fog is my example. Now, where could that have gone if you didn't handle it correctly? All of a sudden, now I'm in some valley or drainage that I'm not familiar with. And now I'm walking and I start looking and instead of using that powerful survival tool between your ears, you turn around and you're kind of following your nose. And that's a good way to get in trouble.
Yeah. Have you seen a lot of those, the search and rescue? Have you been a part of those things where you're searching for people?
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely. And so that's how it starts. So I have a presentation that I give. It's called I Was Just, and then ...
Oh, right.
That's how it starts. I was just, and now you fill in the blanks.
Yeah. I was just fishing out my back door sort of.
I was just going to run over there real quick. Yeah. I was just going to go behind this rock for some privacy so I could go to the bathroom. I was just going to run back up the trail to the campsite to get my camera because I forgot it. Hey, you guys keep on. I'll meet you at the lake. Right. And then that person then starts the week-long search and rescue mission.
Right. That's it. So on that stop mode, was that an acronym, STOP? What's it stand for?
STOP, yes. Stop, think, observe, plan. So what you're doing is you're stopping, you stop moving. So now you gather your wits, take a drink of water. If you're scared, a drink of water will kind of wash that coppery fear taste out of your mouth, get rid of the anxiety a little bit. Think about the situation. Okay, what is it that actually is going on here? Observe the environment, figure out what it is that you're seeing. I know where I am. I don't know where I am. And then put together a plan to fix the situation.
That's good. Okay, so we'll put down, hopefully we'll have maybe on our Instagram, we'll have a little story of this that we can put down, maybe get some photos, some stuff. Well, we're definitely...
I was trying to come up with a fishing one. My dad and I, we were trying to follow a compass bearing across the straits. We were fishing up in British Columbia.
Oh, wow.
So on the Sunshine Coast up on the up towards Port Hardy. So we're in the Canadian San Juans in there. And from where we were staying, we took a compass shot out to where it was. Because in the morning, it's foggy. So the fog story, right? Well, there's shipping out in this lane that we're trying to get across. What we didn't remember was that there's current in the ocean, right? So we take our little compass bearing out in the front. And this is my 12-year-old self. And I'm like, oh, yep, that's the direction, and I'm giving my dad back and forth. Well, we're going and we're going and we're going. We missed the island completely because we drifted to the south with the current. And when we figured that out, we spent the whole rest of the morning trying to figure out where the hell we were to get back. And it took the fog lifting for us to actually to get back to safety, so to speak. So again, it's this a variation on the same thing, but since your listeners are fishermen, so
yeah, that's right. Well, I love the compass. I think is interesting because I feel like the compass is very important, especially if you know how to use it.
Yes.
But like for me, for example, I've never, I've had compasses, but I just, again, I do the thing you probably shouldn't do. My phone I have out there, and it's worked great for me forever. I haven't had that one situation yet, but how would you recommend on the compass? Is there a class that people would take? Do you think it's an important thing? If somebody's listening right now, do you think they should learn how to use a compass?
Oh, absolutely. I think they should buy a compass and they should learn how to use it. That's just one of those. It's an emergency gear. It never needs batteries. It always works. As long as the earth is spinning, you will have a compass.
Where should they go? Is this something where you just pop up 10-minute YouTube video, or where would you send people?
Yeah, there are YouTube videos out there. There are books written on the subject. It is not intuitively obvious.
It's kind of confusing, right? Because you got to turn this thing, and then there's some compasses probably that aren't very good too, right? Well, I think again, the safety, going back to this, the blanket thing I think is so perfect because everybody's got one. The kits are on Amazon, but like they also sometimes have these compasses that are kind of flimsy and do those really work?
No. My joke for that when I'm in the class is I pull one of these out and I say, this compass is very inexpensive. And it always points to the country where it was manufactured.
Right.
Not to the North Pole. Right. So, yeah, that's a joke.
How does that happen in this day? So the blankets, these compasses, how does that get? Because there's millions of those things out there, and they're not all Chinese made, right? I mean,
no. How
is that possible? Because that seems like that's a dangerous thing to have out there.
I would agree completely. And, welcome to my world is what I would say. But yeah, what you get is well-intentioned, uninformed people. And so what they get is, and who the worst is, I'm not disparaging this group because they're great, but it's your hometown scout leaders, for example.
Oh, really? Like like the Boy Scouts?
Yeah. And not across the board. This is not a universal term, but I'm giving you an example of how this could go. Somebody doesn't really understand. They think they do. And they pass on bad information, or the other really primary source. So that's part of it. And now, the University of YouTube is fantastic. I mean, here we are on a podcast.
I know.
But when you talk about looking at popular media, is, real survival is not necessarily sexy or exciting when it's done appropriately. And so what you get is somebody who's making a 20-minute segment for use for 30 minutes on a network, and they're literally saying we need more Jeopardy, we need something, we've got the 2-minute culture, right? We've got this. It has to be funny or exciting or jaw-dropping or get you within 2 minutes, or we're going to click on something else.
God.
And that, I think, is part of the problem as well. And so what you get then, because of that, is the information that's out there, the individual points that are appropriate get lost in the weeds.
Yep, that's it. No, that's one of the things I love the podcast, because we've been on here for over an hour now, and and it's great because people, there's some people that are listening right now still in with us. And it's beautiful because we don't have to have these short little social media, like, like you're saying, the junk out there. We're really trying to get down to our essence as much we can in an hour or so, right? How can we go? And I feel like we've done good, because I go back to, like you, I think you simplify things. You got 3 things. There's 3 things right now we can get that we could throw in our pocket and we can take with us everywhere. There's, the 6 things that if you want to make something bigger. And I want to just point people as we get out of here to your website, because you have a couple of products. What would you recommend if somebody wanted to get one of these packages? Because you have some different levels. What do you tell them?
Yeah, I do. So we've got 3 different levels. So I have a starter kit. We call it an outdoor safe survival kit. And that is a shelter, fire, and signaling kit. It comes in a little Cordura, which is a heavy nylon pouch with a zipper up on the top of it. It literally has a ferro rod. It's got 2 of those little waterproof match containers for cotton and Vaseline. It has an immediate action shelter bag in it. It has a signaling mirror and a whistle, and a little piece of flagging tape, actually, that you could tie up in a tree. So the from a signaling perspective, color, contrast, size, movement, it sticks out, and it does all of those things. So it's an attention grabber for either for you or for someone else. So that's the starting kit. We have another, which is, we call it the 98.6 kit. And that one has all 6 of the categories. So it's got shelter, fire, signaling, water disinfection and storage, survival medicine and tools that go into it. And it's designed, we actually built that one under contract for Customs and Border Protection. So it's a DHS product and the pilots still use it, by the way. We still supply it. They're for aircrew. So the idea was to put it in the leg pocket of a flight suit. So it's about the same size as the pouch that we have on the starter kit. It comes in a little royal blue pouch that goes in there. And it's got an immediate action shelter bag, but what some of the added items in that, there are 2 of those MP1 tablets and a small collapsible water bag that goes in there. There's a little LED flashlight that's inside of it. There's a little solid shank neck knife that goes with it. There's 40 feet of cordage that's in there from a sheltering perspective. And then there's an instruction booklet.
Oh, this is the emergency survival kit.
That's correct.
So this is the kind of the big thing that's got pretty much everything.
No. This is the in-between. This one's called, the one that I just described is called the 98.6 kit.
Oh, yeah, that's the 98.6. Yep.
Now, the emergency survival kit is the one that's designed for a vehicle. And that's like 4 people, right? So, and that one's going to be, it's almost a foot across and maybe 3 or 4 inches thick. It weighs maybe 7 pounds, 5 to 7 pounds. And it's got enough stuff. It's got all of those categories. And, you could put all of those materials inside of that.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, you got these different levels. And I think, again, the easy thing would be right now, a good step would be for everybody to get that first kit, which is your 3 things, right?
Right. Now, if most people also, when I talk to them, they're like, oh, I already have a survival kit. And it's like, okay, well, let's evaluate that. So every one of those individual items that's in there, most people do have some decent stuff. They also have some, like they'll have a space blanket in there, right? And I'm like, okay, you should get rid of the space blanket and you should put a bag in there. Don't even use my bag. Go to Walmart and get a garbage bag and use that. That will do you more good than the space blanket will, etc. So all of the individual components are available as well.
Okay, and that's the cool thing is that, yeah, you don't have to necessarily buy your stuff, although the way you package it and everything here makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, makes it convenient. We're trying to, you can spend a lot of money on survival kits and or equipment and not necessarily get any improvement. So you don't want trinkets, but you don't have to break the bank either. And that's where it really comes into play. And the best advice in that department I could give you, whatever it is that you buy, try it out. Don't just throw it in the trunk of your car or in your bag. Like literally play with it. And if it's that good, hell, buy 2, right? So, beat the snot out of one and figure out how to use it and then put the other one that's in pristine condition for when there's an emergency.
Yeah, that's a great point. So get it out, use it. Just like anything, do the reps. You got to try stuff. So when the situation happens, you're ready to go.
Exactly right.
Cool. Well, this has been great, Brett. I think we'll kind of hold it there and send everybody out to outdoorsafe.com if they want to check more into this. And this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you going in deep here, and we'll look forward to keeping in touch with you. And
absolutely, anytime. And anybody can reach out as well at the website.
Yeah, that website. Is that the best way? Just go to your website?
It is. Yeah, no, exactly. So there's we have a little, info there's a, contact us on the website. You can just drop me a note. And we're a small business. So I do travel a lot and I do train a lot, but I come up for air every couple of days. So I answer all my email.
Okay, I see. And you even have you have an office phone too, email office phone. So you got both of those things. Okay, good. Well, and then any other questions? So we'll direct them there. And then, until we talk again, Brett, appreciate all your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Roger that. Stay safe.
All right, you have to, if you want to have a chance to stay safe out there, head over to outdoorsafe.com and check in and maybe pick up that 98.6 pack. That sounds like, I think it's about a little over $100, and all the items are there he talked about today. You could also just get the smaller pack, the 3 key items, that one as well. I'd go for if you do anything, it's pretty easy, especially that small pack can just fit in your pocket, and why not? It might save your life. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any app that you are on out there. If you haven't heard about Wetfly Swing Pro, I want to give you a little heads up here. We are relaunching. We actually already launched Wetfly Swing Pro through our founders. And now we are launching the next cohort, and this is going to be pretty amazing. If you're interested in Wetfly Swing Pro, go to wetflyswing.com/pro. And if you go there, you can sign your name up, and we'll follow up with you as we launch the next cohort. And essentially, we're doing these throughout the year to provide a better resource, better value for those for that group that's going in. So if you want to get involved in this next cohort, this next group, go there right now, and you can find all the great stuff about Wetfly Swing Pro, and you can get involved in that. We're trying to keep this to like a limited number as we get into this, so we can make sure that this is the best experience possible. So if you haven't yet, check out Wet Fly Swing Pro. Sign up there and we'll follow up with you on details. All right, next episode, Alex Zini Hall. Zini, this guy is what do you call this guy? He's unique. We watched a short film on Alex. It was pretty awesome. Steelhead angler, so we're going to get it with Alex Zini. If you know Zini, stay tuned for that next episode. He'll be here. All right, appreciate you for stopping in today. Hope you have a great afternoon. Hope you have a great evening, or if it's morning and you're cooking up those eggs, enjoy them, and we'll see you on that next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.